Welcome to Spirits Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia.
And we're so honored to be joined today by Samara Breger. Samara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's always a pleasure. And would you mind just starting us off by telling the audience who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into things?
Sure. I'm Samara. I'm a writer and a performer, and I live in New York. And my sapphic vampire gothic, A Long Time Dead, came out last month.
It did indeed. If I recall correctly, the New York Times called it the best sapphic vampire novel since Carmilla.
They might have said something along those lines.
Maybe. Who can say, really? You know,
who can
just
say
the
what
New York Times.
The 5 copies that I purchased downstairs say?
All in shadow boxes like my husband did when we got mentioned in the New York Times. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I feel that vibe. Incredible. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the novel, and then we'll get into the heart of what we want to talk about today?
Sure. So it's kind of an old school Gothic horror. It takes place from 1937 to 35 years from that point. And it is about these two people, one of whom was a vampire for almost 2 centuries. Her name is Roisin, and one is Poppy. She was just turned. And it's about their romance and their pasts and a big found family that they're part of in Victorian London. And it's decadent and exciting and a little bit scary and a little bit gory. And it was fun to write, and I hope it's fun to read.
I can assure you, listeners, it is. It is, in fact.
You crossed my algorithm when you wrote an article for Alma about reclaiming vampires as queer and Jewish. And as a queer Jew and someone who loves vampires, I was like, gotta reach out. We just have to talk whether or not it's about any of this stuff. I love that. I love that you've written about Our Flag Means Death. It just, it seems like you are a person whose interests overlap highly with ours. And so chatting with you about all things folklore and hopefully drawing folks to go ahead and rent or buy your book is all the best, all the better.
Yes, and if you're interested in my book, please get it from a library. I get so excited when I see the library stickers on the spine of it. Ooh, it really does it for me.
Oh boy, now I gotta go to my library and order it up, even though I've read it already. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
So I guess maybe to get us started, do you want to tell us why vampires? What about vampires kind of attracts you in a way? And then what about it, like, do you remember the first vampire lore or vampire story you read or saw or heard?
So definitely my first vampire was the Count on Sesame Street.
Classic.
I loved him. He sounded like my grandmother. My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor from Germany. So I was always drawn to, you know, Central European, Eastern European, heavy accented people, because those are my people. And yeah, I've really loved vampires, especially the silly ones. I love the What We Do in the Shadows vampires. I love, in the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall, the Dracula musical, the puppet musical.
Incredible.
So good.
But yeah, I hadn't planned to write a vampire novel until two other writers at my publisher, Anna Burke and Jen Alexander, approached me and said, do you want to write a novella and we'll put them out as a trilogy? And I was like, yeah, that'll be easy. And I initially modeled it after, if you've seen the episode of the first season of Good Omens, where Crowley and Aziraphale, these, you know, immortal beings, meet each other throughout history. If you like Our Flag Means Death, we probably have a lot of overlapping interests. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they meet each other throughout, you know, history in a whole bunch of different locales and eras. And I wanted to do that with vampires, so I wrote a novella. And then Anna Burke came to me and said, mine's a novel. Can yours be a novel? And I was like, no. No more. No, I'm done. And then I sat down and I thought about it. And I've always really loved Gothic literature. I got a very bad grade in my Gothic literature class in college. Aside from that, I've really just adored it. And I really sat down and thought about, if I had the opportunity to do this, if I dedicated myself to this project, what it would look like and what I wanted to address and what parameters I wanted to set for myself. And that's when I started thinking about myself as a Jewish writer in this context. And that's when I started to make some choices.
Oh, incredible. Well, let's talk about some of those choices, shall we? Because we've talked a little bit on the show about the kind of anti-Semitic roots of vampires. We did a vampire bracket earlier on. Was that last year? Time flies by.
Yes.
Who won? Who won the vampire bracket?
Carmilla, obviously.
Oh, yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
yeah,
Who else, really?
We're discerning. We know what we're talking about. Yes.
So we talked about that, and particularly talking about the anti-Semitic roots of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And would you mind at least for just kind of talking us through the different beats and the kind of origins and I guess anti-Semitic stereotypes that Bram Stoker was utilizing in Dracula?
So when Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, and I want to preface by saying I don't think this was maliciously anti-Semitic. Horror really reveals what our cultural anxieties are at the time. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there were a lot of Jews emigrating to England to flee pogroms in Eastern Europe. There was this view that I think persists in certain parts of British society that blood was an indicator of temperament. You know, there's like the blue-blooded upper crust people who have good breeding. And then there are the other races that are, you know, in a very eugenicsy way, more prone to violence and sexual degeneracy and predation. So Dracula is this Orientalist figure. He is of the East. He is Eastern European. He drinks blood. He preys on people. That goes back to the issue of blood libel, which is an anti-Semitic stereotype that has gone back to medieval times.
Not the restaurant chain.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the fun one, not the turkey leg.
No. You know, the word cabal comes from Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, and the large nose and the effeminate character of Dracula being part of this, you know, Jewish sexual degeneracy and hoarded wealth and illness, just bringing, you know, this there was this theme of invasion literature, of these outside populations bringing weakness into the British Empire. So a lot of that is in Dracula. A side note, I love Dracula. I think, you know, it's a complicated book to hold in my mind, but it's also a hugely entertaining piece of literature. And it's also exceptionally funny. And I think that now with Dracula Daily...
I was about to ask you about Dracula Daily, so thank you for getting
Dracula
there.
Dracula Daily. Seeing Jonathan Harker memes on Tumblr
is paprika.
Oh, paprika. I put the paprika in my book. I couldn't leave it out.
Of course.
But seeing all the close reads of it has been hugely encouraging and exciting, and like the amount of I know it sounds kind of patronizing, but like the amount of reading comprehension that's been going on with Dracula now is really exciting.
Yeah, a lot of people, you know, they'll read for pleasure and stuff like that, but it's been a minute since a lot of people have like written an essay about why this book means this and, you know, the parallels and allegories and metaphors and whatnot. So it is kind of nice to go on Tumblr and be like, yeah, you guys all get it now. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dracula is complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. And it is kind of good to know sometimes that, like, you know, we can acknowledge the like anti-Semitic traits that are reflected in the novel while also being like, really is the forefather of what vampire literature would become later on.
Yes.
So it is nice to kind of balance those two as we look into it, because it is influential in many ways, even if it does harp on some of the more destructive stereotypes that exist out there for Jewish people.
For sure.
Yeah. And at the risk of quoting you to you, so in this Alma piece that you wrote about queer Jewish vampires and loving vampires as a queer Jew, you write about how queer communities have always, quote, molded the dirt thrown at us into treasures, like the word queer. And so that is very much, we can see portrayals of queer characters, of Jewish characters that were drawn from harmful stereotypes and say, you know what, fuck you, and I love them. And that's a response that I love, and it feels like you've kind of gone another step. And you write, too, in the piece about, whether you don't make any of the characters in your book Jewish.
I do not, yeah.
And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about the decision not to kind of engage with that whole legacy that is both an unfair burden for you to weigh when telling your own stories and also just like the lived milieu of your life.
Yeah, I don't want to say I regret not doing it, but between starting this book and now, there has been a kind of meteoric rise in new anti-Semitism, nouveau anti-Semitism.
The fresh.
Yeah, exactly.
Not even the old, the fresh.
Baked. And I wonder whether or not it was a cop-out, but there was a part of me that had a visceral reaction to making Jewish characters drink blood. This is a horror book, and it's a lot of things. It's partially a horror book. And there are some scenes of like very animalistic, rabid blood drinking, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And I thought maybe, I don't try to do anything with my books other than write a book. It's not like I want this book to change this. I want to write a book. But I was kind of hoping that like coming at it sideways, taking away these very like casually, inadvertently anti-Semitic tropes would help like sweep away some of that, miasmic anti-Semitism that's in this genre. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Because you still see it. Like it's still, in that Alma piece, I feel kind of unfair to the people who made this show. But there's a show called First Kill, and when I was watching it, and it's a lesbian vampire show that a lot of people loved. But when I was watching it, I was like, oh my God, like this one, they took everything. There's some hopefully extremely inadvertent anti-Semitism in this that's still happening.
Yeah, you can always tell when a Christian wrote a vampire thing when they do like, the demon Lilith, and you're like,
actually.
Do you know who Lilith actually was?
We pause on this for 3 seconds. Yeah, there's a lot. And I'm a Jew by choice. And so that was one of the things that for me, there's garden variety anti-Semitism that we all know about. I thought are, growing up Christian, caricatures and stereotypes that I knew to be false. And then there's like the more pernicious, so normalized and baked into society parts of anti-Semitism that, it took a Jewish perspective and education for me to realize. And so even now, within the community, realizing that there are so many ways that, that the kind of concept of blood libel and of blood drinking and of all of the things related to, blood, especially when it comes to horror, sci-fi, fantasy stuff I love, that is so baked into the folklore of what we retell and the things that we think, I'm sure for many people inadvertently, just kind of like reproduce a trope that they have seen reproduced before them.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm grateful. It's often in the reclaiming that I realize, the origins of that is pretty fucked up. And I love this queer Jewish take on this thing that was meant to exile and use the perspectives and sort of character traits of queer people, of Jews, to point at us as different. It's a very queer response, very Jewish response to say, I'm fine over here. Like, go fuck yourself and I'm going to enjoy it. Yeah.
I'm gonna pick my battles.
Yes.
Yeah, it reminds me, gosh, like there was somebody on TikTok maybe last year who was doing this goblin character with a big hooked nose talking about all their coins. And people were like, hey, don't do that. And the response was like, can we not do anything? Can we not? It's like, yeah, of course you can. You can do it thoughtfully. You can do goblins thoughtfully. You can do vampires thoughtfully. Just just think about it for a sec. You know?
Think about why these particular traits are being used and where they came from, and then be like, hey, let's not continue it if we don't have to.
Yeah. My husband, Eric, wrote for Alma as well about the anti-Semitism baked into Dungeons and Dragons and all kinds of traditional high fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
And the race, quote unquote, of the goblin that, has certain Eastern European characteristics and is, short and predacious and, hoards wealth and all of these things. Once you see, you can't unsee it. And again, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy them or make interesting, smart choices. It means that you are aware of where these things come from and how to, make it less harmful to people, first of all, and secondly, hopefully more welcoming. And also, thirdly, better and more creative as we move forward.
Yes. And also to recognize that it's not always inadvertent anti-Semitism. Sometimes it's straight up anti-Semitism and we should keep an eye out.
Gringotts is no accident. That's all I'll say about that.
Oh, God.
But there's also so much queer and Jewish and just horror-loving joy in this book and in your work. And can you tell me a little bit about what you love about vampire stories, and especially about queer vampires? I know my answers. Vampires have always read as super queer to me.
Yes.
Tell me more, about like your love for this genre and how you maybe hope to like contribute to, the broader canon of sapphic vampire stories.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So when I read Carmilla, a lot of it clicked for me because that book, there are a lot of queer-phobic stereotypes in that book, but there is so much humanization as well, and there's so much like empathy with Carmilla, with that kind of thing, because there is something so sexy about a monster that is so fixated on you to the point where like kissing them isn't enough. They want to be inside you, taking your blood, like getting strength from you, obsessed with you in your mind, turning into a cat sitting on your bed, like doing weird shit because all they can think about is you. And like there is this very insidious stereotype of queer people that has been used a lot now, especially against trans people, is that we're all predators, that we're all lurking in bathrooms, trying to do terrible things to people. And that's not true, obviously.
We are chastely touching pinkies only in mainstream media.
Absolutely.
And extrapolating from that one day somebody might kiss.
Absolutely. God, I remember when they first, the gay guys kissed on Modern Family, like in the background, like, But there is something sexy. I'm thinking of like, mid-century lesbian pulp. There's something so sexy about like the older co-ed who is sort of eyeing you and finding you and locking in on you in that way. And it's partially sexy because it's in real life, it's not okay.
Yeah.
As is so much of everybody's sexuality.
Yes.
And especially straight sexuality in the sex industry. I know, like you have 1,000 thoughts on this.
I have so many thoughts.
I'm preaching to the choir here as I'm adding on.
Yes, there is this thing. I don't want to get too in the weeds with this because I could talk about it forever, but there is this moral purity that's called for in fiction now, which like I understand. I understand that if it's like a book for, teens, if it's YA, I understand not, putting in something that's dangerous. But if it's for adults, I think that we have the understanding and the reading comprehension to say like, okay, well, this is fiction and fiction is not life and it won't be. And these people are vampires and it's fine.
I think there's also something appealing in a queer perspective about Carmilla, especially the fact that it was published in 1872, I think.
Yeah.
And like the idea of, I imagine for like queer women at the time who were reading this, the idea of someone actually actively pursuing you rather than just having to like kind of hide in the shadows your true like feelings and intentions and whatnot. And so I think that kind of adds to the sexiness. It doesn't seem predatory when that's what you want someone to do and society denies it from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you read the version of Carmilla with Carmen Maria Machado's Annotations.
No, I haven't yet. Is it? I can imagine it's good.
It's great. And one
Yeah.
note is like, if this isn't an orgasm, I don't know what is. Like this vague but not vague description of an orgasm.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was hugely freeing for people who saw themselves in it.
Absolutely. And, you know, like we're talking from a queer perspective. And like we were saying before, like vampires have always been kind of queer coded in some way, whether it's like the more quote unquote effeminate nature of Bram Stoker's Dracula, from Carmilla, and everything beyond that. It really does seem like the gays have always loved monster fucking in general, but in particular vampires.
Yes.
Yeah.
If society calls us monsters, like, we're gonna fuck. I don't know what to tell you.
We're
Like,
gonna fuck the what else are we supposed to do? It's like,
I don't know.
learning. This is maybe a little simplistic, but like The Little Mermaid. You're learning about the making of The Little Mermaid and Howard Ashman being a gay man, and Ursula being divine, being based on divine, being based on a drag queen, is like, oh, we're in there and we're the more interesting ones, and we can't. Maybe we don't see ourselves, as the two main people who are getting to kiss each other. But look what beauty we've created in the margins,
Yeah. Even as a fat person growing up, like before I knew that I was queer, I was like, you know what? Ursula is like, has a body like mine and is like living her life and loves it. Like
except for the tentacles, Amanda.
Yes. Well, I mean, listen, that could have been interesting to me too, but I didn't know why exactly at the time.
Tentacles get a bad rap. That's what I say.
I know. They're just fingers.
They're just.
Julia's like, I don't know about that.
I don't know about that, but listen, man, I'm not gonna yuck your yum. That's on you.
I don't know. There's so much to love here, and especially in horror. Julia and I have been friends our whole lives, and loving horror and loving fantasy, loving sci-fi. It is in these kind of otherworldly environments that we can start to imagine societies that are radically different, welcoming, where kinds of loves, relationships, friendships, found family. Like, there's a reason why that's a trope, right? Like, it is often in places that look the most unlike our world that we can sort of imagine what that relationship, love, truth, personal journey could look like in our everyday reality. And I don't know. I'm glad that so much of sort of like genre fiction, right, or like genre movies, as a overly simplistic, like reductive term, it feels like we're in a renaissance of that kind of production and also critical acclaim.
Yes.
But part of me feels a little territorial, like the kid who's like, well, I like that band before they opened for Paramore or whatever, because I'm like, well, I don't know. I've always collected my 5-cent like horror novels from garage sales. I overall, I am so glad that there is a market for stuff like this more and more.
Yeah, me too. And I'm also somewhat conflicted. Yes.
No, yeah, like there is a certain like conflict there. And going back to your suggestion of The Little Mermaid, this idea that Disney did a lot of, which is like kind of queer coded villains. And then all of a sudden you have a generation of kids who are like, fuck yeah, Ursula, Jafar's my guy, like all this kind of stuff. And they're like, no, you weren't supposed to like it. I'm like, well, then why did you make them look like me? Why did you decide, like, was I supposed to not like them because they looked like me? No, I'm going to like them even more so because I see myself in them, right?
Yeah.
And it's this idea, and I'm like fairly convinced that is part of the reason why like we get these like generations of monster fuckers, whether it's like Guillermo del Toro, who grew up with the Creature from the Black Lagoon, or like our generation with all of the Disney queer folks, the queer coded villains. I think that's like, you create, like, they're creating the monster that they're afraid of in queer people, which I am like,
absolutely.
It sucks to suck. Sorry, we're going to reclaim all of these for ourselves. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Why don't we very quickly grab a refill and then we'll talk a little bit more about queer vampires and whatnot. All right?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Julia, and welcome to The Refill. First off, I gotta thank our new patron, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys are the lifeblood, the backbone of our community, and you help us do what we do every single gosh darn week. So thank you so much. And thank you, of course, to our supporting producer level patrons, Alicia, Ann, Brittany, Fruity Chick, Hannah, Jack Marie, Jane, Measelkins, Lily, Matthew, Megan, Moon, Nathan, Phil Fresh, Rico Like, Captain Jonathan, Malachi Cosmos, Sarah, and Scott, as well as our legend level patrons, Ariana, Audra, Bex, Chibi Yokai, Morgan H, Sarah, and Bia Me Up Scotty. You can join them and help us do what we do by going to patreon.com/spiritspodcast. And hey, did you know that if you join the Patreon, you get first crack at new merch that we are making? So check it out. Go to patreon.com/spiritspodcast right now. I have a little recommendation for you, and I also owe editor Eric an apology. He has been recommending this game to me for a very long time, and I finally picked it up last night. It is called Inscryption, and it is essentially a card game, but it's also so much more than that. There is a lot going on, and I just started playing the game, so I don't know exactly everything that's going on. But if you like the kind of creepy, mysterious, kind of horror-y vibe that we usually talk about here on the show, I think you'll like Inscryption. Check it out. There is a link in the bio. I also, of course, want to tell you about another podcast here on the Multitude Collective. Have you listened yet to Join the Party? Join the Party is an actual play podcast with tangible worlds, genre-pushing storytelling, and collaborators who make each other laugh each week, including myself and Amanda. DM Eric and myself, Amanda, Julia, and Brandon welcome everyone to the table, from lifelong tabletop RPG players to folks who have never touched a role-playing game before. You can hop into our current campaign, which is a pirate story set in a world of plant and bug folk, or you can marathon through our completed campaigns with the Campaign, a Monster of the Week game that is set in a weird summer camp, Campaign 2 for a modern superhero game, or Campaign 1 for a high fantasy story. And once a month, we release the After Party, where we answer your questions about the show and how we play the game. So what are you waiting for? Pull up a chair and join the party. Search for Join the Party in your podcast app or go to jointhepartypod.com. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, and I want you to take a moment and think about how you spent your last week. How much of that time that you spent in your last week was for yourself versus how much of that time did you spend on other people? Do you know how to balance the two? It gets so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never to take a moment to think about what you need for yourself. I have been running a lot of errands lately for my parents because they recently moved back into town. And it's just, I have to sometimes balance my time and the energy that I need to focus on myself with what they need and how I can help them. And that's something that I talk to my therapist a lot. And therapy can really give you the tools that you need to find more balance in your life so that you can help keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. I, as I've mentioned before, have been going to therapy for a very long time now, and I really think that honestly anyone would benefit from going to therapy, even if you think you don't need it, even if you think you're like well-adjusted and you have no problems and you're not an anxious person or you don't have depression. Oh, I don't need therapy. I mean, sometimes you just need someone who is a sounding board to hear you and give you advice on how best to proceed in things that are giving you trouble or stressing you out. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, try BetterHelp. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just have to fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/spirits today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/spirits. All right, this year, I want you to give your dad for Father's Day the gift of a good night's sleep. Honestly, dads, a lot of them do a great job and they deserve a good rest. And Brooklinen has their comfort covered with a lineup of home essentials made for relaxation. Brooklinen has the best sheets, according to Wirecutter and Good Housekeeping. So if you don't trust me and their 100,000 five-star customer reviews, you know that these experts have done the research. And Brooklinen uses only the highest quality materials for all of their products, such as long, staple cotton. So everything they create is built to last. And listen, I Love my buttery soft sheets. They're breathable during the summer, which is a huge deal because I sleep very, very hot. And I want both my parents to really enjoy the comfort of that. So that's why I got my dad some really nice Brooklinen sheets and also the satin pillow, which he's kind of obsessed with. He saw mine at my house and he wanted it, so I bought it for him. It's just, sometimes the man tells you what he wants, and I appreciate that. So what are you waiting for? Shop in-store or online at brooklinen.com to gift yourself or your loved ones the rest they deserve. Visit brooklinen.com today and get $20 off plus free shipping on orders of $100 or more with code SPIRITS. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Code SPIRITS for $20 off plus free shipping. And finally, we are sponsored by the OG, our tried and true favorites, Shaker and Spoon. Shaker and Spoon is a subscription cocktail service that helps you learn how to make handcrafted cocktails right at home. Every box comes with enough ingredients to make 3 different cocktail recipes developed by world-class mixologists. All you need to do is buy 1 bottle of that month's spirit, and then you have all you need to make 12 drinks at home. It is perfect for if you're hosting a party and you want to show off your bartending skills, which I am constantly trying to show off my bartending skills. And at just $40 to $50 a month, plus the cost of the bottle, it is a super cost-effective way to enjoy craft cocktails. And you can skip and cancel boxes anytime. I really love that everything comes in tiny little bottles. So if I need an ingredient that I would otherwise have to buy a big bottle of and then waste a bunch of money, they gave me just the amount that I need for that. And my favorite part is if I like a recipe, I can order the ingredients that I used from their website and they ship it to me. It's fantastic. So invite some friends over, class up your nightcaps, or be the best house guest of all time with your Shaker and Spoon box. Get $20 off your first box at shakerandspoon.com/cool. That is shakerandspoon.com/cool. And now let's get back to the show. All right, now that we are back, Samara, as always, we love to ask our guests here, what have you been drinking lately? Whether that's cocktails, mocktails, coffee, teas, lemonades, iced teas. What's been your cup of choice lately?
I have not been drinking alcohol for probably 2 or 3 years now.
Shout out.
But there's a drink that Lizzo enjoys at Starbucks that I also enjoy at Starbucks because I'm just like Lizzo.
I love a Starbucks creation, so I'm here with you. You're ready to go.
It's a coconut milk matcha frap with chai.
Ooh.
And I enjoy it. Yes.
I would never think to add matcha and chai together, but that does sound good now that you're saying it. So
yeah.
I'm like, huh.
It's herbaceous. It's sweet.
Earthy, yeah.
It's a little Christmassy on the end there.
Amanda can enjoy it because it's coconut and not regular milk. Amanda,
yes,
you're there.
I've never felt more welcome to a community than I have by the IBS memes in Judaism.
Yes.
Truly, thank you.
Yes.
Ashkenazi internet for welcoming me in.
We welcome you and your lactose-free lifestyle, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Simply couldn't relate. I'm sorry, guys. I eat so much milk and cheese all the time.
A milk drinker.
I know. I'm sorry. I mean, we mostly have almond milk in my house because my husband's like, it upsets my tum. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Whatever. But I can't get rid of the cheese, guys. I simply can't. I was a cheesemonger for a decade.
My wife likes to put cream in her coffee and then just walk around and have a full day afterwards. It's bizarre.
Yeah. That would be my whole day.
Yeah, who's the real monster here? Huh?
It's me, the milk drinker.
Yeah.
Blood? Yes. Milk? No.
No, simply not. So in your article, and also the article quotes a great part of your book where you were talking about kind of the dietary laws in Judaism and how they applied to vampires, right?
Yes.
And one, this is learning about Judaism through Amanda and Amanda's conversion and through fabulous guests that we've had on the show. One of my favorite things is just the arguments that rabbis get into about how to apply Jewish law and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you fall in whether or not you think vampires could drink blood of an animal that they considered clean or not?
Well, Jewish law wants to keep you alive. When you get down to it, if you're worried about your life and your well-being, do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's generally what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, rabbinically speaking, Talmudically speaking, these vampires can definitely keep kosher and drink the blood of a cow. If I were a vampire in this situation and I kept kosher, which I do not in real life, I think that I would happily drain a number of cows. I think the Midwest would fear me.
And then, you'd write some commentary on it and then say, like, this rabbi from 5 decades ago didn't know what the hell he was talking about. And I'm writing it down so anyone in the future who knows that I'm right has some precedence to point back to me.
That's correct.
Did anyone else in this call ever watch the movie The Littlest Vampire?
No.
It is a movie in which a small boy vampire drinks cow blood and then accidentally transforms all the cows into vampire cows. And it is quite a moment, and it still sticks in my brain. I haven't thought about that movie in like 20-something years probably. So I'm going to try to grab a clip of it for our patrons for the director's commentary for this episode. So you'll know what I'm talking about.
Oh my God.
But I just remember there's like
sounds so good.
Cows in a barn hanging upside down. And it was incredibly funny.
That's a great visual gag. I love that.
Yeah, it was really, really cute. And live action, too. So I was like, how'd they get those cows up there?
Oh, Julia, it's a live action movie?
It's a live action movie, baby.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. I was imagining like a 90s cartoon straight to VHS, but
it does seem like it's that vibe, but I'm pretty sure that it was a live action film.
No, I just brought it up. There's a real, it's like somebody put Hocus Pocus and Tim Burton on their mood board and like Home Alone, and out popped this cover
movie.
Image.
Yeah.
Hang on. I'm going to find a way to put this into the chat.
Oh my gosh, it's just what I imagined.
We're going to need your live reaction to this, Samara.
Oh, that's Jonathan Lipnicki.
It is.
Yeah.
That's your pal and mine, Jonathan Lipnicki.
Sure is. And you can see the flying vampire cows in the background,
oh my
too.
God,
the poster.
This is incredible. They absolutely had Hocus Pocus in that mood board. That
yeah,
booby hair.
100%.
The Bette Midler hair. Yeah.
That Bette Midler hair.
Oh,
doesn't get better than
incredible.
that.
Amazing.
And there's some Addams family in there too. That uncle with a large
big gun.
Yeah.
Gun? Question mark?
Question mark gun.
Amazing.
And then the like rebellious older teenage brother on there on the right. Yeah. It's
Oh my God.
Sorry to totally sidebar us to talk about The Littlest Vampire, or sorry, The Little Vampire.
Yeah.
But man, my childhood just came flashing before my eyes there. So
my next movie night.
Yay.
If it exists. It's hard to find movies these days, but if I can get my hands on this little vampire, I'm going to watch him.
Speaking of childhood influences, I would love to know some of the mythology and also urban legends that you grew up with. Do any of them like loom large in your mind these days?
I didn't have a ton of, because I'm from New York City. I grew up in the city, so we didn't have like hometown spooky guy. But my wife and my mother-in-law are deeply into cryptids.
Very nice.
So in my
Very discerning.
adulthood,
Good family you married into.
Yes. I'm absolutely learning about cryptids, and they're wacky.
they are wacky. Do you have a favorite right now as you're learning more about them?
I like the Florida Dogman. He's pretty cool. But growing up, I was was one of those gay kids that was into Greek gods.
Shout out.
Welcome home.
You found your people again. Here
Yay!
we are.
And, like Egyptian mythology, like I have early formative memories of going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and going into the Egyptian room and like, oh yes.
Oh, yeah.
I need to learn about this type of thing.
Temple of Dendor. We've all been there. We all love it.
Yeah. Did you also read Annie on My Mind and have both a mythological and queer awakening?
No, I did not. But I did read the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Baisley Frankweiler.
Another one of Amanda's favorites.
Seriously. In Annie on My Mind, two girls have a meet cute in, I think it's the American Museum of Natural History, but I always transpose that in my mind to like be in front of the Temple of Dendor and the Met.
But there's also dinosaurs there now.
I love that.
Oh gosh, Amanda, I love that for you. Amazing.
Oh yeah.
Were you also like a crystal queer as a kid as well? Because I was a big crystal queer. I was like,
no.
Oh, look at this amethyst that I got at a street fair one day.
I wasn't into crystals, and as an adult, I'm fairly anti-crystal, which is like my least gay trait.
That's okay.
I also am not into crystals or Taylor Swift, which I feel like is turning my back on my community.
It's fine. I can drive, so that's my anti-queer quality.
Incredible. I can.
And I like math, so, here we all are.
Wow.
We all balance each other out here.
Defying stereotypes. But I loved Teen Witch so much as a kid that we had this write a little novel project in maybe first or second grade, and I wrote a book called Pre-Teen Witch.
Ooh.
Which was a very clear self-insert. And she made it so there were no more drugs in the world. Because I was a little narc, I guess.
Yeah. They got you there early, huh?
Oh, man, yeah.
Oh, that's fine. We won't hold that against you.
You've learned.
I have learned.
We all learned that it was all propaganda, we all learned.
We all learned, some of us the hard way.
Yeah.
There's something I wanted to ask you, again, related to the article, because you dropped, not a bomb for me, because it was something that I was familiar with, but I hadn't heard the phrase in since college, right? Can you tell us about estries?
Can I or can't I? I don't know. I don't know that much about estries. I know that they're part of Jewish folklore, and they are not Jewish. They
fair.
They prey on Jewish people. They're blood drinkers. They're vampires. Because blood drinking creatures show up in so many cultures, throughout history. People say vampires aren't anti-Semitic. There's Chinese vampires from 7,000 years. It's yes, there are. And our modern conception of vampires is based on anti-Semitic stereotypes.
Yeah, those ones, are not committing blood libel and look the way that you would, if you were Bram Stoker, describe a Jewish person. And there's context there.
Exactly.
Just because something drinks blood does not necessarily make it a vampire. That's just the overarching term that we as Western society has put into place for it.
Yes. And that's the case with the estries. They're vampires and they're not vampires. Maybe it's golem times. Old school times. Yeah, so that's where we are. And it's super scary, Jewish adjacent, I think, lady vampires.
You know what I kind of like about this, though, is the idea that this is the opposite of what the anti-Semitic vampire is, where these are specifically these vampires or demons or what have you that attack Jewish people rather than these characters that are supposed to be a stand-in for Jewish people attacking, Christians.
Yes.
But I just really love that this is kind of the opposite of the anti-Semitic stereotype. I think that's a really interesting play on. And it obviously predates the kind of modern Bram Stoker Dracula by several hundred years.
And I'm reading here, it's got a lot of overlap with succubi. So there's always this sexual component. I think that a lot of the fear that comes into the female vampire has to do with, female sexual initiative, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah.
Female sexual dominance or just, female sexual agency. And yeah, the succubus and estries have that in common.
And I think that ties back again to the idea of queerness in vampires as well. The idea of women not being this kind of subservient sexual role in or outside of the bedroom. And especially with Carmilla, because we're going to keep talking about Carmilla. We love her so much.
Yes.
Being that kind of, and you wrote fantastically about this in your Alma article as well, but taking women out of the equation for men. And that's what makes her so dangerous.
Yes. These things that are very terrifying to those who exist very comfortably within mainstream society and these mainstream dynamics. Thinking of, women being submissive and receptive. And then there's this, woman that comes along that's terrifying because she's outside of this. And, at the time, around, the end of the 19th century, there was this idea of the new woman who was coming into more social power and had more of a role outside of the home, more of a role in society and potentially in the workforce.
Wore pants.
Yeah, wore pants. A bicycle? Dramatic. Not a bicycle. This fear, any dominant culture gets this terrible fear when a culture that is the non-dominant culture gets any sort of power because it's like, oh my God, they're replacing us. They're coming for us. They're taking our jobs and our women. And I think that a lot of that new woman anxiety comes into the, female vampires at this time. They're taking the place of men, and now women will love them, our women, as they love men.
Yeah.
They have no need for us anymore.
If only that were true.
I think there is so much about mortality there too, right? We're like underscoring all of these concerns about like whether it is queerness and queer folks taking away from almost like generational permanence, or, an outside population coming through. And that's where you get eugenicsy with the, discussions about like the bloodlines and things like that. Or even I think the female vampire in particular, my unscholarly supposition is that there is some kind of primal fear about like in Christian viewpoints, a like fundamentally like productive to result in pregnancy act not being used for that. And that's what makes queerness seem so alien. And that's what makes monster fucking, right? And like fucking vampires and creatures that reproduce differently or don't reproduce at all. Like that is ultimately a anxiety about mortality and permanence and like what happens to me after I die that I think is behind so much of the for me, like ununderstandable, visceral fear when it comes to how other people live their lives.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. I like that a lot.
Listen, if I was a scholar, I'd write a paper about it, but instead I get to opine on a podcast.
I was going to say, you don't have to
fun.
qualify it, Amanda. That was a scholarly opinion in my mind.
Yeah, scholarly as hell.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It reminds me of in Dracula, you've got two fantastic female characters. And from a distance, I mean, you've got Lucy Westenra and Mina Harker. And from a distance, it's like, yes, this Madonna whore dichotomy, right? Like the one who has 3 suitors.
One of them's a cowboy.
Is the one who gets turned into a vampire. And then the one who like is dutifully by her husband is the one that survives. But it's far more complicated than that. It's not as simple as that because Lucy has the love of these 3 men. At the end of her life and at the start of her new life, these 3 men are there because they love her and they respect her and they give their blood to her numerous times. And, Mina is communicating with Jonathan in shorthand, and she's writing his letters, and she's traveling to get him when he is sick. And these are 2 women characters with agency and with extremely different personalities, and neither one of them, I feel, is condemned for who they are. I don't think that Lucy is being punished. I think that's just how the story goes.
Yeah. And that brings up the final specter of this episode, which is capitalism. And
it's always looming overhead.
Yeah.
Really
and but seriously, like if people with wombs aren't, producing the like product of the next generation of workers, then that represents an existential threat. And whether that's because, they are not having the kind of sex that can result in getting them pregnant, or they have become a vampire, or they are, consorting with, less desirable than, the establishment would like them to, and producing the wrong kinds of children. All of that is what starts getting coded as villainous, morally wrong, and a threat to national security.
Yes.
And that's the kind of stuff that makes me do a double take and pay closer attention, because that's where the creativity is, and that's where the coolness is. And it truly is in the shadows. And that's what I like to read. That's what I like to watch and to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, for capitalism to thrive, there's always got to be this scarcity mentality. There's always got to be like, if we don't keep going, everything will fall apart. And it really limits people. I think, being afraid for fun is great, but being afraid for profit is stunting.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, capitalism.
Oh, capitalism. Really, we talk about a lot of monsters here on the podcast. The worst one is capitalism.
Yeah. And he can't even see him. He's the invisible hand.
Yeah.
I just made a TikTok, and it's my most popular TikTok by far. It's got like 27,000 likes.
Dang.
Oh, dang.
And it's my wife's beige flag is that she always talks about her favorite ever job, which was working at a grocery store. And whenever we're in Trader Joe's, she sighs wistfully, like we are visiting her old high school and she was the quarterback. And so many people in the comments are like, I was meant to stack cabbage. I was meant to scoop ice cream. My brain was at peace. I was happy if I could just have a living wage doing this job and then go home and my brain is unencumbered by data sheets and HR complaints. Like my life would be bliss.
Yeah.
And it was a fun little reminder of how shackled we all are by capitalism.
You know what? There is like sometimes just this idea that, hey, if I could just live a simpler life and not have to worry about making money, there's plenty of jobs that I would do that don't pay enough nowadays that I could actually do them. And that's fine. I get where your wife is coming from with that. I simply do.
If a grocer could have a living wage and in a lot of ways, like the dignity of having a job, you know.
For doing, I don't know, essential work that all of us require.
Exactly. There is something, you know, people do not get respect for doing that kind of work. But if people did, this is not about vampires, but anyway.
That's all right. That's all right.
Well, it sounds like we want to continue the conversation with you as a person, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling like, God, it's like we're friends already. So, Samara, where can our listeners buy or request from their local libraries, which you can just do by walking in or submitting a ticket on their website?
Just talk to a librarian.
Exactly. Where can they become internet friends with you?
I'm on Instagram at YesJBreeg, YesJBreeg. It's not great for my SEO, but there it is.
Same.
And on Twitter, I'm Samara J. Breger. And on TikTok, I'm Samara J. Breger. And my website is samarabreger.com.
There you go. Well, listeners, first off, Samara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It was a delight. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful, casual conversation about, hey, vampires and queerness. We
vampires
love it.
And shit.
And listeners, next time you are approached by a hot sapphic vampire, remember, stay creepy.
Stay cool. Spirits was created by Amanda McLaughlin, Julia Schaffini, and Eric Schneider, with music by Kevin MacLeod and visual design by Allison Wakeman.
Keep up with all things creepy and cool by following us at Spirits Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr. We also have all of our episode transcripts, guest appearances, and merch on our website, as well as a form to send us in your urban legends and your advice from folklore questions at spiritspodcast.com.
Join our member community on Patreon, patreon.com/spiritspodcast, for all kinds of behind-the-scenes goodies. Just $1 gets you access to audio extras with so much more, like recipe cards, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, for every single episode, director's commentaries, real physical gifts, and more.
We are a founding member of Multitude, an independent podcast collective and production studio. If you like Spirits, you will love the other shows that live on our website at multitude.productions.
Above all else, if you liked what you heard today, please text one friend about us. That's the very best way to help keep us growing.
Thanks for listening to Spirits. We'll see you next week.
Bye.